Bonjour. I screwed that up. I'm going to attempt to speak a little bit of French in this video. Just a little heads up. My French isn't as good as my German, and my German isn't as good as my Spanish. Russian is a little bit in there. But yeah, this is a French knife. It's a very interesting knife. I'm going to try to use some of the proper names or terminology, and I'm probably going to screw it up. So any of my French-speaking viewers, I apologize ahead of time. My tongue doesn't move right for English, much less a language that I don't even speak that well. So I don't speak any language that well, apparently. But let's talk about the knife. This is a Laguiole on a blanc. Forgive me, Bastinelli, for... Anyways, this is the knife. This is the Laguiole on a blanc. As you can see on this kind of gift sack. This knife actually came with quite a bit of stuff, which I will briefly show you. It came with this pouch. It obviously came with the knife, which I'll talk about more in a little bit. It came with a certificate of authenticity that has someone's name or signature on it, which I cannot read. And it comes with this piece of paper that has a few statements on the Laguiole and congratulating on you before buying a legitimate one. Apparently that logo is pretty important if you want a legitimate one. I'm no expert on French knives, but I'm starting to appreciate European knives a lot more than I did in the past, which I'll talk about again later. And it also comes with this pretty cool book, if you can call it a book. It's pretty thin. It's a pamphlet or book, literature, or whatever you want to call it. And it basically goes over the a little bit of the history of the knife and the steps involved in making it. And it pretty much goes through all the steps. I mean, you're not going to be able to make one in your garage after reading this, but you'll have a pretty good a grasp or understanding of how this knife is made by reading this. And it's a very interesting read. It's both in French and English. Yeah, so pretty cool. I'm really appreciative of this. The certificate of authenticity is nice. The pouch is nice. This gift bag, which would be awesome if I was giving this away as a gift. It's a good quality gift bag. It's not nothing. Paper is flimsy, but there's nothing cheap about this bag at all, which would explain the cost of this knife. Which this knife, it doesn't cost an outrageous amount of money. There's a lot of handwork that goes into this knife, there we go. Zoom in a little bit. It's a Laguiole. And to give a brief history of the Laguiole knife, hopefully I'm saying that right, and I'll demonstrate my Spanish here in a little bit as well. Basically, this knife is a cross-Polynesian between the Spanish Navaja, which this is a cold steel, and the, I hope I can say this, Carpaccio. The Carpaccio is a fixed blade knife that was used in this region of France. And what happened was there was some French dudes that went to Spain during some seasonal event. I don't know if it was vacation or if there was business there, but for whatever reason there was these French people going to Spain, and they came across the Spanish Navaja Caraca, which Navaja is a Spanish word for folding knife, which comes from the Latin word navicular, which means basically straight razor. And naviclite Navaclite, which also shares the same root word as Navaja, is basically Arkansas sharpening stone. It was also used to make arrowheads and flint blades. It's technically not flint, it's Navaclite. So the word Navaclite, Laguiole, Navaja, they're all related, and this is the French version of this, except this was very benign, and this was associated with violence. I'll also open this knife up, zoom up on it, and I'm going to make a very cool connection that you might not pick up on the way. This being a evolution or cross-pollination of the Navaja Caraca. This is the Laguiole knife, which is a Navaja and a Cachaplay do. I know I screwed that up, mixed together, but look at this knife. What knife does this remind you of? Let's see if this helps. You can see the blade. What American knife does this remind you of? My knife enthusiasts, especially in the traditional knives, you're probably going to catch this pretty quickly. I'll give you a second. Now I'm going to give you another hint. What case knife does this remind you of? Starting to get it now, huh? This is almost exactly the same knife as the Texas toothpick or tiny toothpick or little toothpick. The case toothpick. This has the same silhouette as that. It has the Yatagon blade shape. It has this handle shape. Both are slip joints, although this originally wasn't a slip joint. But yes, this is almost the... I would hate to call this the French version of the toothpick, because I truly believe this predates the case or the Texas toothpick as we know it. But they're almost identical, which is pretty cool. So you get this Papa Barrel knife, or the Granddaddy knife, the Spanish Navaja Caraca. It cross-pollinates with the Cachaplay do, which I'm sorry, my French-speaking audience. I'm sorry. I'm trying my best. It cross-pollinates with that. We get the Laguiole knife, and then later we get the Texas toothpick or the tiny toothpick. Case makes the toothpick. It's also called a powder horn knife. Great Eastern Cutlery makes the knife. Buck makes a version of the knife, but Case is the most famous version of the toothpick knife. And I thought that was cool. We got the Spanish, French, and American knives influencing each other. So I wanted to point that out. Now let's talk about the knife itself. I want to say this is a 12 centimeter blade, which is around maybe 4 inches. I haven't measured it out. Over 3 inches, maybe 4 inches. I don't know where my ruler is, or I'll check up on it. But I'm very confident it's 12 centimeters. Convert that in your head. Also, some of the stats and specifications, I like to get those out of the way first. 12C27 steel. Very, very popular for the Laguiole knife. Basically, if you're going to get a Laguiole knife in France, it's most likely going to have this steel. Sometimes they use, what is it called? Not ATS 34. It's the European version of ATS 34. It has the numbers 34 in it, but you'll use that steel, or you'll have Damascus in these blades. But 12C27 is by far the most popular cutlery steel used in the production of this knife. Like all the knife companies use 12C27. And I gotta say, it sharpens up very easily. Holds a decent edge. It's not a super still, so you do need to know how to sharpen this knife. And I'll get into some of the criticisms later, but you do need to know how to sharpen a knife. I'll leave it at that. This one is made out of juniper wood, which, if you haven't ever handled juniper wood, which you should at some point in your life, it has a smell. It's a very fragrant wood. Most of us in the U.S., we know what pine smells like. We know what cedar smells like. They don't hold a candle to juniper wood, because pine and cedar and those woods, they smell like a tree. This smells like black pepper. It seriously does. It smells like you should be shaking this on over a steak. It smells exactly like black pepper, which is really, really cool. It's an aspect. This knife is attractive over 4 out of the 5 senses. It's aesthetically pleasing, it feels nice in the hand, and it smells. You just can't taste it. Or can you? But, anyways, stainless steel bolsters. This is the back spring, which is very aesthetically pleasing to the eye. You notice it has a B. This head is called lamouche, if I'm saying that correctly. Lamouche literally means the fly, but this isn't a fly, this is a bee. The lamouche doesn't actually refer to the bug. It is a cutlery term that refers to the spring head. And the spring head could be a flat disc, or it could be round, square, spatula shaped. It can have a floral motif like a shamrock, clover, fleur-de-lis. But most common is the bee. The bee is kind of where it's at when it comes to Laguiole knives. And the cool thing about the lamouche and the black back spring is that this is all forged out of a single piece of metal. The fly, the back spring, one single piece of metal, then they start decorating it by hand. They get files and they file all this stuff in there, including the bee. So the inferior, the very cheap Laguiole knives that you find like in Bud K and stuff, they weld the bee on the back of the blade, if they even bother to do that. So quality knives will be made out of a single piece of steel, or the back spring and lamouche would be made out of a single piece of steel and then decorated afterwards. It also has a little bit of guillotine. I can't say it, dang it. But it has some, I think this is supposed to be the signature engraving of the individual cutler that made the knife. Something that's pretty common in French cutlery, which is pretty cool when it comes into the higher end kind of artisan regional knives. A lot of times there was a single cutler who works on the whole knife from start to finish. You know, in factories and like American made knives and all the mass produced knives, you know, it's an assembly line, it's a factory. Several people get their hands on it at a time. Either the machine kind of makes it and then it's finished off by one guy, but this is actually made like with files and hammers and stuff from start to finish by a single cutler. And to me, that's awesome. Yes, it is pinned. I don't know if you can see it, but those actually, you know, they polish this up pretty good so you don't see the pin that well. You got pin right there, pin right there, pin right there, pin right here. Then you get these group of pins, and I'm out of frame. Pins. This is an interesting piece. This is known as the Shepherd's Rosary or the Shepherd's Cross. This knife was originally made for shepherds and the rural class. These knives were not decorated originally, but they did include the Shepherd's Rosary or Cross. And the ideal behind this is you would stick this in like a loaf of bread, you'd look at it, and you'll pray to it, I guess. Which, you know, I'm happy I have the Shepherd's Cross. You know, I'm a Christian. I like crosses, but I don't agree with praying to the cross. You know, I talk to my Heavenly Father whenever I want to without having to have something in front of me. And also, I want to bring in a quote from Martin Luther. Those of you who don't know, there was a Martin Luther before there was a Martin Luther King. And he has a very interesting quote that kind of pertains to this. He says, it's not the duty of the Christian shoemaker to put crosses on his shoes. The duty of a Christian shoemaker is to make good shoes, because God is interested in fine craftsmanship, high quality stuff. So, yeah, I thought I'd throw that out there. You know, I like the cross being on there because I like telling you about the historical significance and stuff. And although it's not the prettiest cross, you know, it is there. You can see it. But I don't need it to pray. I also wanted to throw that Martin Luther quote in there because a lot of people don't realize there was a Martin Luther. They just remember Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was named after Martin Luther, who was one of the guys who spearheaded the Protestant Reformation. All right, there we go. And I'm not saying that this is a bad quality knife, but let me get back to that. In fact, I'll talk about it right now. This knife came to me relatively dull. It had a utility edge on it. You can cut stuff with it. It would cut, but when I pay a certain amount of money, I expect a razor's edge. And I'll get into the price later. You can see where I've tested knives out on my arm, and I'll show you right here. The tip is a little bit duller than the heel, but you can see that it will shave, because I like my knives shaved. The tip is still razor sharp, but just not quite as screaming sharp as the back end of it. And there's a reason for that. I use this as a food prep knife or a picnic knife. I'll get into more how I use it later, but this knife didn't come that sharp. Having the $177 price tag, I think it should have been sharper. So yes, I'm not saying this is a bad quality knife. It has the single forged back spring and lamouche. It has the kind of very fancy juniper wood. It's very smooth to the hand. It's very comfortable in the hand. You know, they obviously spent a lot of time convincing you with the certificate of authenticity, the pouch, the gift bag, the pamphlet, all this stuff, that this is a special knife. If it is a special knife, I expect to have a very keen edge. And that was the big disappointing factor when I got this knife. Other than that, there's not a whole lot I can complain about this knife. It functions very well in specific tasks, and I'll talk more about this knife in general and why I like it a little bit later. I will tell you, I did EDC this blade, and it didn't perform some of the tasks as well as other knives. When I get an EDC knife, I like a knife with good tip control. I really like this knife. You got a good tip, and it's not a whole lot of belly. This is a good blade shape, as is a karambit or a sheep's foot or a Warncliffe is excellent for EDC task, because when you're opening packages or boxes or breaking down boxes or envelopes, that tip is what you're doing a lot of the work with. It's what penetrates in and allows you to get that cut. You can cut coupons out of magazines and catalogs. It's where I do the majority of my work. Although I like my knives to have a little bit of belly. No belly isn't, you know, perfect, or no tip control. Though it needs to be a good balance. And I think the Endura is a good balance. I think this no-till blows the open-L out of the wattle. So this knife, when razor sharp, didn't break down boxes as good as some of my favorite EDC knives, which isn't a hit on the knife itself. You know, obviously this knife was designed over, you know, what was it? It was 1829, I believe. 1829, this knife was first invented. And they weren't thinking of opening up envelopes and breaking down boxes back then. They were cutting string, they were probably skinning game or food prep, or cutting cordage, possibly cutting into the ears of their animals for branding purposes. For those of you who don't know, they still do this with pigs. You'll cut notches into the ears to brand your animal so you know whose animal belongs to who. And this was done with sheep, and I don't know if it was done with bulls, but it is a task that was done. This was the EDC knife of the French shepherd and peasant. And they started out very humble, very ugly. They had the shepherd's cross, but they weren't decorated like this. And what happened was, when the Laguiole reached Paris and the upper class of France, they liked it, but they wanted something that was more of a status piece. They wanted something more aesthetically pleasing to the eye, so they started decorating the lamouche, guillecharge, firework, fancy handle material, and higher polishes on the blade and bolsters and stuff. So this knife moved from a very rural utility, almost beetle knife, to a high-end collectible and a status piece, which is where I want to jump on or talk about the Laguiole knife in general as an artisan knife that you can get from several different companies in France. There's several companies, and then there's several craftsmen who make the Laguiole knife the traditional way, and they do an excellent job. And depending on how much money you want to spend, you can spend anything from like $90 to over $800. You can get burl wood, walnut, snake wood, bone, horn, mammoth ivory, and mammoth tooth. And you know that I like mammoth, fossilized mammoth. I love the mammoth ivory and tooth and stuff. I have it on my William Henry knife. And this knife, with those high-end fossil materials, you can get it with Damascus steel and the guillecharge, where it has firework all up and down the blade, and then the handle or in the channel, and they have firework on the plates, not just the back spring. You can get these dressed up as much as you like, and it's cheaper than a William Henry knife. If you get a $800 or $900 William Henry knife, it's a very plain knife. You get a $1,500 William Henry knife, that's when you start getting some beautiful stuff. But you can spend anywhere from, this was $177, which you can argue might be a little bit much for this knife, although I like it. I'm just a little bit disappointed at how it came to me. But you could spend, $200, $300, $400, $500, $600, $700, $800 and get something that is truly amazing looking, and would be a very good art knife. It's an artisan knife, but you don't spend the William Henry price, and you actually get something that's a lot more functional than the William Henry. Now, I'm not saying that if you spend $800, you're going to get a knife that's more beautiful than a William Henry knife. I'm just saying you get something that is as good for the money. Pound for pound, the best fighter type of thing. You're not going to get the diamonds and the gold and stuff, but you will get, firework and expensive handle material on Damascus. But where's my William Henry? I know where it is. It's across the room. But basically with a William Henry knife, I'll get it. You need to see this. And I love my William Henry, but I regret spending the money on it. This is a William Henry knife, and it is beautiful. You're not going to get Makunagame with these Laguiole knives, but this is the knife. Very small, good EDC blade, has a good blade shape. You have good tip control, has a little bit of belly, and diamonds. It's a button lock, mammoth tooth. Anyways, with this blade, it's not really the best for food prep. It's not something that you're going to really cut rope with. You're going to do very delicate tasks with these. Open up envelopes, cutting thread, opening up boxes that don't have metal ribbon in it. Because I use this to cut ribbon, and I found out the ribbon had metal in it, and I chipped the blade. Had to get my brother to repair it. Happened to me twice. Kind of irritated me. Anyways, this is over $1,500. You can get this dressed up for around $800, and you know, comparing the size, you have a whole lot more capability with this Laguiole knife. It's not as smooth, it's not as fancy, but you can get it fancy and not spend as much money as it would take to get this, and it's more capable. So I wanted to point that out. Now, there was another downside to the traditional, let me stress, the traditional Laguiole knife. Very similar to the traditional Filipino handmade balisongs. You cannot slam them shut. You have to ease them shut, because there's nothing protecting the edge to the inside channel of the blade. That's steel right there, and if you let it shut and slam shut, it's going to dull your edge. There was actually a French proverb, I'm going to paraphrase this, but it says, silent springs live longer. And this is a reference to the Laguiole knife. If you shut it and it doesn't make a noise, your blade, your edge is going to last longer. So, in it, also I want to point out, it does open with authority. It's not going to accidentally shut on you, and it does have a half stop. But you have to shut it gently. So that is a downside, although there is a company that innovated and engineered that issue out. So I want to get one of those knives eventually, but anyways, I don't know how long this video is, I apologize, but this knife gives me plenty to talk about. And there's the tang stamp, focus, Laguiole on a block, the Laguiole trademark, the company trademark, and that bull is associated with the Laguiole area. It's on a block bull, and it's a traditional cattle of France. So you'll often see that associated with Laguiole knives. That being said, super cool. I'm really starting to appreciate European blades. You know, a lot of us in the tactical community, we're all about the balisong, switchblade, tanto point, karambit, you know, very aggressive, you know, exotic things. And it's nice to take a break from that every now and then and appreciate the art and the hand craftsmanship and the cutlery heritage of Europe, which is where most Americans come from. So to me, American cutlery heritage is very closely rooted in European cutlery heritage. And that's it. I hope y'all have a great day. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Again, I apologize to all my French viewers. Out of all the languages I dabbled in, French is the hardest one for me to speak. I know a little bit of Russian, German, Spanish, a little bit of Chinese. French does not cooperate with my tongue. So That's it. Hope you have a great day. I'm a Satsu 5 and I'm out.